Hey friends, it's Lauren Taylor. Thanks for joining me back in my craft room today. I'm grateful to have you here. I am crafting with some scrapbook.com exclusives today, like this layered butterfly set, this beautiful retro garden rub-on transfer sheets, and the new vacation paper pads. I just love these colors, and I thought they matched pretty well with these retro garden images. There's not any green in the paper pad and there aren't any blues in the rub-on, so I'm going to focus on using more of the pink and orangey kind of colors of the paper pad, and then I will bring in some green with ink. Now, when I started this card in my head, I already had kind of a plan, but as I make the card, I realized that that plan was not coming together. So I kind of have to pivot a little bit. And overall, I really love how this card turned out. So I guess I'm kind of grateful that I was forced to kind of change directions while I was working on this card. I'm going to start with stenciling, and I grabbed some distress inks that I thought matched pretty well with the Retro Garden transfers. And I have Fired Brick, Saltwater Taffy, and Forest Moss. I grabbed a sheet of this peachy pink colored paper from the 6x8 Vacation Smooth paper pack, and I'm using the Floral Confetti 6x8 stencil. Now I will end up die cutting a rectangle that will fit on an A2 card out of this background. So I just put some tape, mint tape, on the top and bottom of my paper, and then I'm using my magnets. My glass board is magnetic to hold down the stencil. I wasn't really kind of worrying about having tape or the magnets in the way while I was ink blending these two colors. This is Saltwater Taffy in the center and Fired Brick around the edges, because I knew I was just going to die cut the section that I needed with my rectangle. Now, I was originally going to put a rub-on on that circle die, which I end up doing, but I don't like it as time goes on. So that's why you see that circle die cut. I was trying to ink blend in a way where it would be lighter, going out to darker edges around the circle. Um, but we don't need the circle, so just disregard seeing that in my video. And I picked a nested A2 die. This is the second largest of the rectangles. I actually meant to do the largest, but I grabbed the second largest by accident. So when I glue it to my A2 card base, there will be a white border, but that's okay. I like white borders on my cards, so it works out fine. So here you can see I die cut that circle out of the kind of light vanilla colored cardstock, and I added that big floral hello rub-on. But I wasn't liking it. It was kind of bigger than I was thinking in my head. And when I die cut all my butterflies out, it just wasn't matching well. And I was like, I just don't like it. I was getting a little discouraged. So I just kept on going, and eventually it all worked out. So you see that hello floral sentiment. It's so pretty. It will go on a card eventually, but not this card. I'm taking that Forest Moss Distress ink and using a blender brush to distress the edges of my stenciled background. And then I'm also splattering some of that color around the edges of that paper. And then I'm picking up the color. I wanted to have a very subtle splatter look. I wasn't going for anything super vibrant, I guess you could say. I wanted it to be more kind of that dried back vintage color. So once I'm happy with adding that green to the card, I'm going to move on to figuring out how I want to lay my butterflies, and I end up really liking having the yellow cardstock distressed with the Forest Moss ink, and then the two different colored pink butterflies distressed with the Fired Brick. And I will end up layering the lightest pink as the solid butterfly. The darker pink, I'm going to glue that directly to the solid pink butterfly. And then I will add the yellow detail butterflies I'm just going to glue the center of them. So they're going to kind of pop up a little bit off the card and have some fun detail with the different colors. Since I decided that I didn't like how that circle rub-on sentiment was coming along with this card, I decided to grab my Thank You Sentiments 3 decorative die set, and I grabbed the same yellow that I've been using for the butterflies and the lighter peachy pink color, and I die cut the thanks sentiment. So I have that yellow shadow die cut, and I'm adding again that forest moss. And then the lighter one is the actual thanks sentiment and adding a bit more of that fired brick. Kind of an ombre look is what I was going for with these pieces. I didn't want it to be too dark. I wanted that really kind of light pink to really pop off the yellow. So I just added a little bit of ink using those blending brushes. I'm grabbing my artiste glue and I have my tweezers holding my thanks sentiment, and I'm just going to go along with my fine tip on the artiste glue to add adhesive behind my sentiment, and then glued that right onto my shadow die cut. After that, I'm going to kind of play around with how I think my layout is going to be. I'm kind of debating if I needed more butterflies, but I liked having one big and one small, and I knew that I would still have plenty of room for some floral rub-on. So I'm going to cut 2 of these out from the Retro Garden transfer sheets, and I did fussy cut around my flowers, which I know you're like, why on earth would you do that? It's a rub-on. And that's because I'm going to use my Sizzix switch to press on my rub-ons. And I noticed that when I use an automated machine to do this technique, it will press the plastic that the rub-ons are on into the paper. So if I have just a wonky shaped random cut like lines around my rub-ons, I get that line in my paper. So I fussy cut them out so when I run it through, it just kind of creates a little bit of an indentation around the image and not this weird wonky shape pressed into my background. Now, you definitely don't need to do this technique. I actually saw it recently on the scrapbook.com channel, a live stream. Laura did it. But before that, I also read it on a Facebook post in a Facebook group, and I thought that is brilliant. So I tried the technique, and again, I had a wonky shape impression in my background paper. So that's why I fussy cut it out. But you definitely don't have to do that if you're going to use, I think, just a regular hand cranking machine. I don't think the pressure is the same, or if you want to use the little popsicle stick that comes with the transfers, you don't need to do this. But this is just how I found best kind of takes away that weird wonky shape when you use your die cut machine to help press on your rub-ons. I hope that made sense. I'm going to take my big old tape runner here and add some adhesive behind my background and adding this to an A2 card. And I literally did the worst job centering my background. I guess it's not the worst job. I've done it worse. But it was definitely off to the side and a little low. So I knew I could at least trim it on one side to make it thinner. And it's not quite as obvious that it's a little low, I guess. So my card is slightly thinner than an A2 card, but no big deal. Now I'm going to glue my butterflies together. So I'm using my artiste glue and I'm adding glue completely behind that pink butterfly to glue it onto the shadow butterfly die cut. And then for some reason I added my white gel pen first for this butterfly, but I'm adding highlights here, and then I'll use the artiste glue to just glue behind the body and antenna of my butterfly, and I will glue that down to the pink. And I repeat that same process for the other butterfly, but I do add the highlights after I glue it together so that way I don't worry about smearing anything. And then I'm also adding highlights to my thanks sentiment, which I just love this look. I think it makes it look really glossy without it actually being glossy. And now that I have a rough idea of the layout, again, I knew that I wanted my two butterflies kind of in the corners and my thanks in the middle. I'm going to go ahead and glue those down. So just adding glue behind my butterflies. I'm adding the larger one in the bottom left of the card and the smaller one in the top right. Now my butterflies have some dimension because I only glued down the center of that yellow butterfly and I kind of curled up the wings a bit. So I knew I could add some dimension behind my sentiment to kind of match that look. So I just used some foam adhesive and added that to the little more top but center of the card. For my final touches, I grabbed my pops of color, and this is a white gloss, and I added it to the center of my butterflies thinking like, oh, it'll look really nice, like they'll just kind of pop off the card. And then I tapped it and my butterflies got a little chunky, as I would say. They're eating well. They are wonderful full butterflies. I added a few more pops of color around the flowers just to bring in more of that white, like the white flower in that lower corner, and to also just help with the highlights on the card. But I really love how this card turned out, and I'm so happy I kept going and kind of changed directions because I think this turned out so much better than I had originally imagined. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll click like, and if you're new here, I hope you'll subscribe and come back. As always, you can find everything I use down below in the description box. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye!